Same courtroom. Same fluorescent lights humming, that low electric hum that gets into your teeth if you sit there long enough. Same judge. Honorable David Brightman. Silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses. The kind of face that doesn't move much because it's seen too many people lie under oath to waste energy on expressions. Same table. Same chair. I know because the left armrest still has that chip in the wood that I rubbed my thumb against 2 years ago, while a lawyer laughed at me and a judge gave my life to a man who never built a single thing in it. 2 years ago, I walked out of this courtroom with nothing. No daughter, no house, no business, no dog. I walked through that door with my hands empty and my name stripped off every piece of paper that mattered. The lawyer across the room had said 5 words that I heard in my sleep for 700 nights. She deserves nothing. And the room had agreed. Silently, efficiently, legally. The room agreed. Today I walked back in. Same door. Same hallway. Same metal detector that beeps if you forget to take off your belt. But today I had something I didn't have 2 years ago. One piece of paper. One single document that my grandmother hid in a safe deposit box in Twin Falls, Idaho, because she saw something in the man I married that I was too in love to see. She'd been dead for 3 years by the time I found it, but she saved me anyway, because that's what grandmothers do. They protect you even when they're not here to do it in person. The judge read the document. His face changed. Not dramatically, not the way faces change in movies. It was small, a tightening around the jaw, a shift behind the glasses, the kind of change you only notice if you've spent 2 years learning to read rooms because your survival depended on it. He looked up from the paper. He looked at my ex-husband, and he said 6 words that emptied the color from Marco Marchetti's face like water draining from a sink. "Bailiff, take this man into custody." But I'm getting ahead of myself. You don't know who Marco is yet. You don't know who I am. You don't know about the bakery, the dog, the little girl who asked me every other Saturday when she could come to my house, or the grandmother who put a brass key in an envelope and waited for me to need it. So let me go back, all the way back, to a kitchen in Twin Falls, Idaho, where a woman with flour on her hands taught me that bread is patience, and patience is everything. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. Have you ever lost everything, not because you failed, but because someone took it? Have you ever stood in a room where the truth didn't matter because the other side had better paperwork? If that question just made your chest tight, stay with me. This story is going to take a minute, but it's going somewhere, I promise. And if it speaks to you, subscribe. Not for me. For the grandmother who saw it coming and left the key. I grew up in Twin Falls, Idaho, a town that sits on the edge of the Snake River Canyon like it's thinking about jumping, but never does. My father, Earl Weaver, was a ranch hand on a cattle operation south of town called the J.B. Bar. He left the house at 4:30 every morning and came home smelling like hay and diesel and the particular kind of tired that lives in a man's shoulders when his body has been someone else's tool for 12 hours. My mother, Connie, worked at the county clerk's office, filing deeds and marriage licenses and birth certificates, the paperwork of other people's lives organized in other people's filing cabinets. We weren't poor in the way that makes the news. We were poor in the way that makes you eat cereal for dinner on Thursdays, because Thursday is 2 days before payday, and the math doesn't stretch. I wore my cousin's hand-me-downs until 8th grade. I got my first pair of new jeans at 15. I remember them because I remember everything that was mine and not someone else's first. But we had Nana Rose, my father's mother, Rose Weaver, 79 years old when she died, though she'd been ancient in the best possible way since I was born. She ran a pie stand at the Twin Falls Farmers Market every Saturday for 31 years. Apple, cherry, pecan, and a lemon meringue that made grown men close their eyes when they ate it. She baked the way some people pray with her whole body, with total belief that the thing she was making mattered even if the world didn't notice. She taught me. Starting at age 8, I stood on a wooden step stool in her kitchen on Shoshone Street and learned to measure flour by feel, to knead dough until it breathed back, to roll a pie crust so thin you could almost read a newspaper through it. She told me once, while we were cutting butter into flour with 2 forks because she didn't believe in food processors, "Jolene, bread is patience. You can't rush the rise. You can't skip the knead. You put in the time or you get nothing worth eating. Life's The same way, the people who try to skip the work always end up with flat bread. I didn't understand that then. I understand it now. I studied business at UW-Milwaukee, graduated in 2011, and spent 4 years working as an operations coordinator at a distribution company in Boise, saving every paycheck, developing recipes on weekends, and waiting until I had enough to start something of my own. By 2015, I had $8,000 in savings, a notebook full of recipes I'd been refining since I was 16, and a sourdough starter that Nana Rose gave me in a mason jar with a sticky note on the lid that said, "Feed her every day. She's family." I still have that starter. I kept it alive through everything that came after. Everything. It lived in a jar on my kitchen counter through the worst 2 years of my life. Feeding it every morning was sometimes the only reason I got out of bed. Jolene's Artisan Bakery opened on September 3, 2016, on 8th Street in downtown Boise. 1,200 square feet, a kitchen barely big enough for 2 people, a display case I bought used from a diner in Nampa that was closing, and a chalkboard menu I hand-lettered myself because I couldn't afford a sign maker. I did everything. I baked from 4 a.m. I opened the doors at 6. I made the coffee, worked the register, decorated the cakes, swept the floors, balanced the books, and locked the door at 7 p.m., 7 days a week, for 8 months straight without a day off before I could afford to hire my first employee. The sourdough was the anchor. Nana Rose's recipe, adapted, evolved, made mine over years of 4 a.m. mornings and failed batches, and one perfect loaf that made me cry the first time I pulled it from the oven, because it tasted exactly like her kitchen on Shoshone Street. Customers lined up for it. The Boise Weekly ran a small feature. Word spread the way it does in a city that's big enough to have restaurants, but small enough to have a grapevine. I adopted Biscuit that first year, a golden retriever puppy from the Idaho Humane Society. He slept under the counter while I baked at 4 a.m., his chin on my foot, his tail thumping against the floor every time I opened the oven. He was the first thing that was mine, that I didn't have to share with anyone or explain or justify. Just a dog and a bakery and a sourdough starter. That was enough. That was more than enough. I met Marco Marchetti in April 2017. He was a restaurant equipment sales rep for a company out of Salt Lake, 33 years old. He came into the bakery to sell me a convection oven. He stayed for 2 hours, ate 3 croissants, and told me I was the most talented baker he'd ever met. I believed him because nobody had ever said it before in a voice that sounded like it meant something. Marco was not loud. He was not aggressive. He didn't sweep me off my feet with grand gestures. He swept me off my feet with competence, or what looked like competence. He asked smart questions about my business. He pointed out inefficiencies in my supply ordering. He offered to help with my books just as a friend, and when he showed me how much I was overspending on flour by ordering from the wrong distributor, I thought I'd found a partner. Not a romantic partner, a business partner, someone who understood the machinery behind the bread. The romance came second. By September 2017, we were dating. By December, he'd moved in. By March 2018, he'd proposed. And the day he proposed, my Nana Rose, who was 77 years old and had the hearing of a woman half her age and the instincts of a woman twice it, drove up from Twin Falls, sat at my kitchen table, and said 5 words that I dismissed at the time and have replayed every day since. I don't trust that man. I was offended. I told her Marco was kind, helpful, smart. I told her he'd already improved the bakery's margins by 15%. I told her she was being unfair. Nana Rose listened to all of it. Then she said, "Get a prenup." "Nana, that's insulting. We're getting married. Get a prenup or I'm not coming to the wedding." She meant it. Nana Rose didn't bluff. She played cards every Tuesday night at the Twin Falls Senior Center, and she'd never bluffed once in 30 years. I knew because she told me, and because a woman named Gladys Hinkle still owed her $14 from a poker game in 2003 that Nana Rose brought up every Thanksgiving. I got the prenup. Nana Rose hired a lawyer in Twin Falls, a man named Walter Henning, who'd handled her will and her pie stand's vendor contracts for 20 years. The prenup was clear. Article 3, Section 2. All business assets, intellectual property, recipes, branding, and operational rights associated with Jolene's Artisan Bakery shall remain the sole property of Jolene Weaver, regardless of marital status. Article 7. The Fraud Clause. If either party conceals, transfers, or misrepresents marital assets, the concealing party forfeits all claims and faces potential legal action. Marco signed it. He smiled when he signed it. "Whatever makes your grandmother happy," he said. Nana Rose was present at the signing. She watched Marco's pen touch the paper. She watched his signature land on the line. Then she did something I didn't see. She went to Walter Henning's office the next day, had him make a certified copy, and drove to First Federal Bank in Twin Falls. She rented safe deposit box number 1147. She put the copy inside. She locked it. She put the key in an envelope with my name on it and added it to her will. She never told me. She never told anyone. She just prepared. Because Nana Rose understood something about bread and about men. You can't always control the ingredients, but you can always keep a copy of the recipe. Marco and I married in April 2018. Small ceremony at the Boise Depot. My parents drove up from Twin Falls. Nana Rose wore a blue dress and sat in the front row and did not smile during the vows. Nobody noticed except me. I thought she was being stubborn. She was being right. After the wedding, Marco gradually took over the business side. The books, the accounts, the filings. He said it made sense. "You focus on the baking. I'll handle the numbers." Within the first year, he'd renamed the bakery. Marchetti and Company Artisan Bakery went up on the sign where Jolene's Artisan Bakery had been. He told me it was a branding decision. Marchetti sounds more artisan, more Italian. Trust me, it'll attract a higher-end clientele. I didn't fight it because I was focused on the bread, not the sign. I should have been focused on both. Lily Rose Marchetti was born on June 8, 2019, 7 pounds, 1 ounce. I named her middle name after my grandmother. When Nana Rose held Lily for the first time, she looked at me and said, "This one has your hands, baker's hands." Then she looked at Marco holding the car seat and said nothing. Nana Rose's silences were louder than most people's speeches. The bakery grew. Revenue hit $420,000 by 2021. I'd hired 4 employees. We were written up in Idaho Statesman. A food blogger from Portland called my sourdough transcendent, which is a word I had to look up and then laughed about for a week. I was baking. I was building. I was raising a daughter who stood on a stool beside me at the counter and decorated cupcakes with the fierce concentration of a surgeon performing a transplant. And Marco was managing the business side. "You focus on the baking. I'll handle the numbers." Sound familiar? It should. Every woman who's ever been separated from her own financial life has heard some version of that sentence from a man who was planning something she couldn't see. Over 4 years, Marco did the following without my knowledge or consent. He changed the LLC registration, removing me as managing partner and listing himself as sole member. He moved the bakery's bank accounts to a new institution where only his name was on the signature card. He changed the mortgage on our house on Ustic Road, refinancing it in his name only under the pretense of getting a better rate. He told me each change was just paperwork, or for tax purposes, or nothing to worry about, babe. I signed things he put in front of me, not because I was stupid, because I was baking at 4 a.m. and managing staff and raising a daughter and keeping a business alive with my own hands, and I trusted the man I married to handle the things I was too exhausted to read at 9 p.m. after a 15-hour day. Trust isn't stupidity. Trust is what happens when you're building something and you can't carry every brick yourself. You hand some to the person beside you and believe they'll stack them straight. Marco stacked them in his own pile. 2 years into the marriage, Marco told me we didn't need the prenup anymore. "We're a team. That document is insulting. I thought you trusted me." He said he shredded it. I was hurt but relieved that the tension was gone. I didn't check. I didn't ask for proof. I trusted him. What? He didn't know. Nana Rose had already made her copy, already locked it in a box, already put the key in an envelope. The woman who never bluffed had played her hand before the game even started. Nana Rose died in October 2020. She was 79. She passed in her sleep in the house on Shoshone Street, in the bed she'd slept in for 43 years. with a library book on the nightstand and a kitchen that smelled like cinnamon because she'd been baking that afternoon. My father found her the next morning. He called me from her kitchen. His voice was flat in the way voices get when the grief is too big to fit through the phone. I drove to Twin Falls. I sat in her kitchen for an hour. The oven was still warm. There was a half-finished pie on the counter. Cherry, the lattice top only 2/3 done. She'd stopped mid-weave. I sat there looking at that unfinished lattice and understanding for the first time that some things don't get completed and you have to make peace with the gap. I didn't know about the safe deposit box. I didn't know about the key. I didn't know that my grandmother, even in death, was still holding a piece of paper that would save my life 2 years later. I built that bakery with my own hands. I kneaded the dough. I created every recipe. I opened the doors at 5 a.m. and closed them at 7 p.m. I hired every employee. I decorated every wedding cake. And a man in a suit who'd never touched flour in his life stood in a courtroom and said I deserved nothing. And the room believed him because the paperwork said his name, not mine. If you've ever had someone take what you built and tell a room full of strangers, it was never yours, stay with me. Because what I did next took 2 years, 3 jobs, and 1 envelope I almost threw away. Marco filed for divorce in March 2022. I came home from the bakery at 7:30 p.m., flour still on my apron, and found the papers on the kitchen table. Not a conversation, not a discussion. Papers, typed, filed, served. His lawyer was Victor Slade. I'd never heard the name. I'd learn it the way you learn the name of the thing that hit you. Marco's filing claimed the bakery was his business. He was listed as sole managing partner on the LLC, the document he'd changed without telling me. The house on Ustick Road was in his name. The bank accounts were in his name. On paper, Jolene Weaver owned nothing. On paper, I was an employee in my own life. He wanted full custody of Lily. She was almost 3 years old. He argued I worked too many hours, that I couldn't provide stable childcare, that he was the primary financial provider. He wanted the dog. He wanted Biscuit, a golden retriever who'd slept under my bakery counter since he was a puppy. Not because Marco loved Biscuit, but because Marco understood that taking Biscuit would hurt me, and hurting me was the point. I couldn't afford an attorney. I had $340 in my checking account. Marco had been paying me a salary from the bakery, $2,800 a month, deposited into an account he controlled. I had no savings, no credit cards in my name, no financial identity independent of the man who was dismantling me. I was assigned a legal aid lawyer, a young man named Jeff Cooley who was handling 40 cases simultaneously and looked like he hadn't slept since law school. Jeff was kind. Jeff was also overmatched. He didn't dig into the business records. He didn't challenge the LLC filing. He didn't investigate the financial manipulation. He didn't have time. He had 40 files on his desk, and mine was one of them, and the system isn't broken. It's just underfunded, and underfunded means the person with the most money wins. The hearing was in June 2022, Ada County Courthouse. Judge David Brightman. I wore the nicest clothes I owned, a gray blouse and black pants I'd bought at Goodwill the day before. Marco wore a suit, new, expensive, paid for with money from my bakery. Victor Slade was everything I expected and nothing I was prepared for. 52 years old, silver hair, the kind of voice that fills a courtroom the way smoke fills a room, not because it's loud, but because it gets everywhere. He presented Marco as the business owner, the primary earner, the stable parent. He presented the LLC documents, the bank statements, the mortgage records, all showing Marco's name, only Marco's name. Jeff tried. He argued that I'd built the bakery, that the recipes were mine, that the reputation was mine. Slade produced the LLC filing showing Marco as sole member. Your Honor, my client built this business from the ground up. Ms. Weaver assisted. She's a talented baker, no doubt, but the business itself, the LLC, the accounts, the client contracts, these belong to my client. Jeff asked about the prenup. I'd told him about it. He asked if I had a copy. I didn't. Marco had told me he'd destroyed it. Jeff asked the court to compel Marco to produce the prenup. Slade responded, "There is no prenuptial agreement, Your Honor. My client has no knowledge of any such document." Marco sat at his table and said nothing. He didn't have to. The paperwork said everything he needed it to say. And then Slade said it. The 5 words. He was summarizing his client's position, wrapping up, voice smooth, confident, the tone of a man who's about to win and wants the room to know he knows it. Your Honor, with respect, she deserves nothing beyond what the court standard guidelines provide. My client is the business owner. My client is the homeowner. My client is the stable parent. He laughed. Not a big laugh. A courtroom laugh. A small exhale through the nose accompanied by a half smile directed at Jeff Cooley, who was holding a file folder that was too thin and a case that was too weak and a client who was too broke to fight. She deserves nothing. The judge ruled. Marco got the bakery. Marco got the house. Marco got full custody of Lily with supervised visitation for me every other Saturday at the Boise Community Center. Marco got Biscuit. I got my personal belongings and $800 a month in maintenance for 12 months. I walked out of the courtroom. I pushed through the double doors into the hallway with the fluorescent lights and the water fountain that made a clicking sound and the bulletin board with the jury duty schedules pinned under yellowing thumbtacks. I walked to the parking lot. I got in my car, a 2009 Honda Accord with 187,000 miles and a passenger window that didn't roll up all the way. I sat there for 45 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone. I just sat with my hands on the steering wheel, engine off, watching people walk in and out of the courthouse. People whose lives were being decided inside those walls by people who didn't know them, using paperwork that didn't always tell the truth. Then I started the car and drove to a studio apartment on Fairview Avenue that I'd rented the week before with the last of my money. $675 a month, 412 square feet, a kitchenette with a stove that had 3 working burners, a bathroom where the shower curtain touched both walls, and a counter where I set down a mason jar with a sourdough starter that I'd carried from the bakery before Marco changed the locks. I fed the starter that night. Flour and water, the way Nana Rose taught me. Feed her every day. She's family. Then I went to sleep, and the next morning I started rebuilding. 3 jobs. I want you to feel the weight of that number because living it was heavier than saying it. Job 1. Overnight stalker at Winco Foods on Overland Road. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. $16.50 an hour. I stocked shelves in aisles that smelled like cardboard and floor cleaner, lifting cases of canned tomatoes and dog food and cereal, walking approximately 7 miles per shift according to the pedometer on my phone that I checked once and then stopped checking because the number was depressing. Job 2. Morning. Barista at the Daily Grind on Capitol Boulevard. 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. $14 an hour plus tips. I made lattes and Americanos and smiled at customers who were having a normal Tuesday morning while I was running on 3 hours of sleep and the particular kind of adrenaline that comes from knowing that if you stop moving, the math collapses. Job 3. Weekend catering assistant for Idaho Occasions, an events company that handled weddings and corporate parties. $18 an hour. Saturdays and Sundays. I carried chafing dishes and arranged table settings and stood in the kitchen of other people's celebrations, cutting vegetables while someone else's daughter danced with her father at someone else's wedding. I slept approximately 4 hours a day, usually between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. I ate meals from the Winco Deli discount rack, the items marked down at 9 p.m. because they were expiring, and leftover pastries from the Daily Grind that the morning manager, a kind woman named Bev, set aside for me in a paper bag, without ever saying why. Delia Sandoval was the night shift manager at Winco, 29 years old, single mother of 2 boys. She worked nights so she could be with her kids during the day. She had a laugh that sounded like it had been broken and glued back together several times, which is to say it was real in a way that only laughs that have survived something can be. Delia watched me clock out at 6 a.m. and walk across the parking lot toward Capitol Boulevard. "Jolene," I turned. "Where are you going?" "Work." "You just finished work." "Different work." She stared at me. "When do you sleep?" "Tuesdays." She didn't laugh. She walked over and handed me a granola bar from her coat pocket. "Eat this before you get there. And Jolene, you're the toughest person I've ever worked with, including my mother, and she raised 4 kids in a 2-bedroom in Caldwell." That granola bar. I remember the brand. I remember the flavor. Oats and honey. I ate it walking down Overland Road at 6:15 in the morning with the sun coming up over the Boise foothills, and it was the most delicious thing I'd eaten in weeks. Not because of the taste, because someone saw me. The supervised visits with Lily, every other Saturday, Boise Community Center on Federal Way. 2 hours. A supervisor named Janet who sat in the corner with a clipboard and tried to be invisible, which is impossible when you're the person who decides whether a mother is safe enough to be alone with her own child. I brought baked goods every visit, cupcakes, cookies, lemon bars. I baked them at 2 a.m. in my studio apartment on my 3-burner stove, using the sourdough starter and the recipes I'd carried in my head since Nana Rose's kitchen. It was the only time I baked anymore. Twice a month. For Lily. She'd see the container in my hands when I walked in, and her whole body would light up the way children light up when they see the thing they've been waiting for. Mama brought lemon bars. She'd eat 2 before. She even said hello. Every visit, the same question. Small voice, big eyes, hands sticky with frosting. Mama, when can I come to your house? Every visit, the same answer. Soon, baby. Mama's working on it. I said soon for 18 months. 18 months of soon, while I stocked shelves and poured coffee and carried chafing dishes and slept 4 hours a day and fed a sourdough starter in a mason jar on a counter in a studio apartment that was too small for a child to visit, but just big enough to keep a promise alive. Marco, meanwhile, was discovering something that should have been obvious to anyone who'd ever eaten bread. The bakery was not the building. The bakery was not the LLC. The bakery was not the bank accounts or the vendor contracts or the sign on the door. The bakery was the baker, and the baker was gone. He hired a new baker within a month, a man from Portland who had a culinary degree and a beard and couldn't replicate my sourdough if you gave him the recipe. The starter, and Nana Rose standing over his shoulder. The bread was flat. The croissants were dense. The lemon bars tasted like a memory of the real thing. Revenue dropped from $420,000 to $260,000 in the first year. Regular customers stopped coming. The Boise Weekly food critic, who'd praised the bakery 3 years in a row, wrote a brief, devastating note in her year-end column. Marchetti and Company has lost whatever made it special. The sourdough, once the best in the valley, now tastes like it's grieving. Marco fired the Portland baker and hired another. Same result. The sourdough starter I'd kept alive for 12 years, the one Nana Rose gave me, was still in the bakery's kitchen. But a starter is not a recipe. A recipe is not a technique. A technique is not the hands that learned it at 8 years old on a wooden step stool in a kitchen on Shoshone Street. Some things can't be transferred by paperwork. Biscuit. Marco gave him to his mother, Patricia, within 3 months. He didn't want the responsibility. He'd taken Biscuit to hurt me, and once the hurting was accomplished, the dog was a burden. Patricia kept Biscuit in her backyard in Meridian. I found this out from a mutual friend who saw Biscuit standing at the fence, looking at the road, waiting for someone who wasn't coming, 18 months after the divorce, December 2023. My father drove up from Twin Falls with a box in the back of his truck. He was 65 years old, still working part-time at the JB bar because Earl Weaver didn't know how to not work. The same way I didn't know how to not work. The same way Nana Rose didn't know how to not bake. "Your grandmother wanted you to have this," he said, setting the box on my kitchen counter. "I've been holding it since the estate was settled. I'm sorry it took so long, baby girl. I couldn't go through her things. Every time I opened the box, I could smell her kitchen, and I'd have to close it again." I thanked him. He hugged me at the door, longer than usual, the way men hug when they want to say something but the words haven't found their way out yet. Then he drove back to Twin Falls. The box sat on my counter for 3 days, next to the sourdough starter, next to a stack of bills, next to a half-empty jar of peanut butter that was dinner more often than I'd like to admit. I wasn't avoiding it. I was afraid of it. Afraid that opening Nana Rose's things would crack something I'd been holding together with nothing but routine and exhaustion. On the 3rd night, a Wednesday, I opened it. 11 p.m. I'd just come home from the daily grind shift and had 4 hours before my Winco shift started. Inside the box, recipe cards in Nana Rose's handwriting, the cursive of a woman who believed good penmanship was a form of respect. her wooden rolling pin, smooth from 31 years of pie crusts, her reading glasses, a Bible with pressed wildflowers between the pages of Psalms, and an envelope, sealed, my name on the front. Nana Rose's handwriting. My hands were shaking. Fatigue, emotion, both. I opened the envelope, inside a small brass key and a note, one paragraph. Jolene, this is the key to safe deposit box number 1147 at First Federal Bank in Twin Falls. Inside is something I kept because I didn't trust that man you married. I hope you never need it. But if you do, it's there. I love you, baby. Make the good bread. Nana Rose. I read it 3 times. The 3rd time, the letters blurred because I was crying and I couldn't stop. I sat on the floor of my 412-square-foot apartment at 11:30 on a Wednesday night, holding a brass key and a note from a dead woman, and I cried the way I hadn't cried in the courtroom or the parking lot or the 18 months since, because this wasn't grief, this was hope. And hope, after you've been empty for long enough, hits harder than anything. I drove to Twin Falls the next morning. 3 hours. I called in sick to both jobs. First time in. 18 months. Delia covered my Winco shift without asking why. Bev at the Daily Grind said, "Take the day, honey. We'll manage." First Federal Bank on Main Street. I walked in with the key and my driver's license. The bank manager was a woman named Carol Oster who'd known Nana Rose for 20 years. She saw my last name on the ID and said, "You must be Jolene. Rose talked about you all the time. She was so proud of your bakery." She was proud of me? Oh, sweetheart, you were all she talked about. Carol led me to the vault. Box 1147. I put the key in, turned it, opened the lid. Inside, a certified copy of the prenuptial agreement. Both signatures, Marco's and mine. Notarized, dated March 2018. Witnessed by Rose Weaver and Walter Henning, Esquire. Every page intact. Article 3, Section 2. The bakery was mine. Article 7. The fraud clause. I held the document in a bank vault in Twin Falls, Idaho, and I heard my grandmother's voice as clearly as if she were standing beside me. I don't trust that man. She'd been right. She'd been right all along. And she'd prepared for it the way she prepared for everything, quietly, thoroughly, without telling anyone, because Nana Rose understood that the best protection is the one nobody knows about until it's needed. I sat in the bank lobby for 20 minutes. Carol brought me water. I stared at the prenup, at Nana Rose's signature on the witness line. She'd signed it with the same hand that taught me to knead dough, that held mine when I crossed the street at age 4, that pointed at the oven and said, "Patience, Jolene. You can't rush the rise." She couldn't rush this, either. She'd waited 3 years in a safe deposit box, and now, when I needed it most, the rise was ready. My grandmother sat at a kitchen table in Twin Falls and watched me sign a prenup. She watched the man across from me sign it too. Then she went to a bank, made a copy, locked it in a box, and never said a word. She didn't tell me. She didn't tell anyone. She just prepared. Because Nana Rose knew something I was too in love to see, that the man smiling across the table was the kind of man who smiles while he takes. She died before I needed that box, but she left the key. If someone in your life ever protected you before you knew you needed protecting, from a letter, a document, a decision they made years before you understood why, say their name in the comments. They deserve to be remembered. I couldn't afford a lawyer, but the Idaho State Bar has a pro bono referral line. I called. I told the intake coordinator my story in 12 minutes flat. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm going to connect you with someone." Teresa Nakamura. 47 years old, family law attorney in Boise. Her office was on Front Street, small, organized with the precision of a woman who believed that chaos was a choice, and she'd made a different one. She had dark eyes that didn't blink when you told her something terrible, which told. Me, she'd heard terrible things before and survived them. She took the prenup. She read it. She read the original divorce filing. She read Marco's sworn testimony. She set everything down on her desk, removed her glasses, and looked at me. "Your ex-husband committed fraud upon the court. He testified under oath that no prenuptial agreement existed. I'm holding one with his signature on it. He filed LLC documents claiming sole ownership of a business the prenup explicitly assigns to you. He manipulated property records, bank accounts, and business filings to strip you of assets that were legally yours. Can you help me? I'm going to help you for free. Because what happened to you in that courtroom is the reason I became a lawyer, and I've been waiting 20 years for a case this clean. Teresa filed a motion to reopen the divorce case based on newly discovered evidence. She filed a separate fraud complaint with the Ada County Prosecutor's Office. Both filings landed on Marco's doorstep on a Tuesday morning in February 2024. Marco called me that evening, first time in nearly 2 years. His voice was controlled, but I could hear the cracks underneath, hairline fractures in a wall that was about to come down. "Where did you get that?" "Get what, Marco?" "Don't play games. The prenup. I destroyed it." "Clearly you didn't." Silence. I could hear him breathing. I could hear the bakery's kitchen fan in the background, the same fan I used to listen to at 4 a.m. while I shaped loaves in the dark. "Who gave it to you?" "My grandmother." "She's dead." "Yes, and she's still smarter than you." I hung up. Set the phone on the counter next to the sourdough starter. Fed the starter. Flour and water, same as every morning. Some rituals don't stop for revenge. They don't stop for anything. The hearing was scheduled for June 2024. Ada County Courthouse. Same courtroom. Courtroom 3. Same judge. Honorable David Brightman. I walked through the same metal detector, down the same hallway, past the same bulletin board with the same yellowing thumbtacks. But I was not the same woman who'd walked out of this building 2 years ago with empty hands. I was 36 years old. I'd worked 3 jobs for 18 months. I'd slept 4 hours a night. I'd fed a sourdough starter every morning like a prayer. I'd baked lemon bars at 2 a.m. for a little girl who asked me every 2 weeks when she could come home. And I'd carried a brass key in my pocket for 6 months like a talisman, a rosary, a reminder that someone who loved me had seen this coming and left me the answer. Teresa Nakamura was already at our table. One folder, clean, organized, the prenup on top. Across the room, Marco, new suit, different from the one 2 years ago, but the same energy, expensive, paid for with money from my bakery, my recipes, my 4 a.m. mornings. Victor Slade beside him, silver hair, same courtroom voice. But today, something in his posture was off. He kept adjusting his tie. He kept glancing at Teresa's folder. He knew something was in there. He just didn't know what. Judge Brightman entered. He sat. He looked at both tables. I could tell he remembered. Not me specifically, but the case, the shape of it. A bakery, a custody ruling, a woman who walked out with nothing. Teresa presented the prenup. She walked the judge through it, page by page, clause by clause. She presented Marco's sworn testimony from 2022, in which he stated under oath that no prenuptial agreement existed. She presented the LLC filings showing Marco changed the ownership structure after the marriage without my consent. She presented the mortgage records showing my name removed without my knowledge. She presented the bank account transfers. She presented a timeline, every fraudulent act cross-referenced with the prenup's clear terms. Slade objected. He argued the prenup wasn't presented during the original proceedings. Teresa responded, the prenup wasn't presented because my client was told by her then-husband that it had been destroyed. The concealment of this document is itself evidence of the fraud we're alleging. My client had no access to this copy until it was discovered in a safe deposit box belonging to her deceased grandmother, who served as a witness to the original signing. Slade pivoted. He challenged the document's authenticity. Teresa produced the forensic document examiner's report. Original signatures verified. Notarization confirmed. Witness signature matched Rose Weaver's known handwriting samples. Slade had nothing left. He leaned over to Marco and whispered something. Marco shook his head. Slade whispered again. Marco's jaw tightened. Judge Brightman held the prenup. He read it. He read Marco's original testimony. He set both documents side by side on his bench and was quiet for a long time. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that has texture, that you can feel on your skin. Then the judge looked up. He looked at Marco. Mr. Marchetti, in your sworn testimony dated June 14, 2022, you stated under oath that no prenuptial agreement existed between you and Ms. Weaver. Is that your testimony? Slade stood. Your Honor, my client. Sit down, Mr. Slade. I'm speaking to your client. Slade sat. Marco's voice was thin. I believed the document had been destroyed. You believed it had been destroyed because you destroyed it. Is that correct? Silence. Mr. Marchetti, I am holding a certified, notarized prenuptial agreement bearing your signature. This document explicitly states that the business known as Jolene's Artisan Bakery is the sole property of Jolene Weaver. You testified under oath that this document did not exist. You filed business documents claiming sole ownership of an asset this agreement assigns to your ex-wife. You manipulated LLC filings, bank accounts, and property records to defraud this court and your spouse. The judge paused. He removed his glasses. He set them on the bench next to the prenup. When he spoke again, his voice was different, not louder, colder. In 23 years on this bench, I have seen dishonesty in many forms, but I have rarely seen fraud this deliberate, this sustained, or this cruel. You didn't just lie to this court, Mr. Marchetti. You dismantled your wife's life with paperwork and then sat in this room and watched it happen. He looked at the bailiff. Bailiff, take Mr. Marchetti into custody. I'm referring this matter to the Ada County prosecutor for charges of perjury, fraud upon the court, and contempt. Mr. Slade, I suggest you begin preparing your client for what comes next. The bailiff moved forward. Marco stood. His face was gray. Not red, not white, gray. The color of something that's been emptied. Slade was on his feet saying words I couldn't hear because the sound in my ears was my own heartbeat and the echo of a sentence I'd waited 2 years to hear. The handcuffs clicked. Marco looked at me. For 2 years I'd imagined what I'd feel in this moment. Triumph, vindication, justice. What I actually felt was quieter than any of those. I felt finished. The way you feel when the bread is done and the oven goes off and the kitchen is quiet and the work is over. Teresa put her hand on my arm, steady, present. The judge turned to me. Ms. Weaver, this court will schedule a full hearing to reverse the original divorce decree. Based on the evidence presented today, I anticipate a complete reassignment of assets and custody. I owe you an apology on behalf of this court. The system failed you 2 years ago. I intend to correct that. Thank you, Your Honor. I walked out. Same hallway, same fluorescent lights, same parking lot. But the woman walking through it was not the same woman who'd walked out 2 years ago. That woman had empty hands. This woman had a brass key in her pocket and a grandmother who'd loved her enough to plan for the worst and prepare for it in silence. 3 months later, the decree was fully reversed. I got the bakery back. Every asset, every account, every piece of intellectual property. The LLC was corrected to its original structure. My name, Jolene's Artisan Bakery. The sign Marco put up came down. My name went back where it belonged. I got the house on Ustick Road back. The mortgage was restructured in my name. I got full custody of Lily. No more supervised visits, no more community centers, no more 2-hour windows. My daughter, my home, full time. I got Biscuit. Patricia handed him over at her front door in Meridian without a word. Biscuit saw me and pulled so hard on the leash that Patricia had to let go. He hit my legs at full speed, tail moving so fast his entire body shook. I knelt on the driveway and buried my face in his fur, and he smelled like someone else's house, but he sounded like mine. Marco was charged. Perjury, fraud, contempt of court. His lawyer negotiated a plea, 18 months in Ada County Jail, full restitution. Permanent restraining order. Victor Slade was not charged with anything, but the Idaho State Bar opened a review of his conduct in the original proceedings. Last I heard, he took early retirement. I don't know if that's related. I don't particularly care. The bakery reopened on a Monday morning in October 2024. I was there at 4 a.m., the same hour I'd always started. The ovens needed cleaning. The floors needed scrubbing. The display case, the same used one I'd bought from a diner in Nampa 8 years ago, needed new glass on one side where the second baker Marco hired had cracked it with an elbow. I cleaned everything. I scrubbed the floors on my hands and knees. I polished the display case. I turned on the ovens and let them heat while I stood in the kitchen with my hands on the stainless steel counter, feeling the warmth build. Then I opened the mason jar, the sourdough starter, the one Nana Rose gave me when I was 16, the one I'd kept alive for 20 years through every apartment. Every loss, every 2 a.m. baking session in a studio apartment on Fairview Avenue. I fed it. Flour and water. I mixed the dough. I kneaded it. I let it rise. Lily was there, 5 years old now, standing on a stool beside me, the same way I'd stood beside Nana Rose. She was decorating cupcakes with a focus so intense she didn't blink for 30 seconds at a time. Baker's hands. Nana Rose was right. Biscuit was under the counter, chin on my foot, tail thumping against the floor every time I opened the oven. The first customer walked in at 6 a.m. Delia. She'd driven across town from the Winco on Overland before her shift. She walked up to the counter, looked at the chalkboard menu in my handwriting, looked at the display case full of sourdough and croissants and lemon bars, looked at me standing behind the counter in a flour-dusted apron, and her eyes filled up. So this is what you were before you were stocking shelves at midnight. This is what I was. It's beautiful. Jolene. It is now. She ordered a coffee and a lemon bar. She took one bite and closed her eyes. This is the one everyone talks about. It's my grandmother's recipe. Then your grandmother was a genius. She was, in more ways than you know. On the wall behind the register, 2 frames. The first, a photo of Nana Rose at the Twin Falls Farmers Market, standing behind her pie stand, flour on her apron, holding a cherry pie like it was a newborn, smiling the way she smiled when she knew something you didn't. The second, a small shadow box. Inside, a brass key on black velvet behind glass. No label, no plaque, no explanation, just a key. Customers ask about it sometimes. What's the key for? I smile and say, it opens something important. They nod and move on. They don't need the full story. The key knows what it opened. I know what it opened. And somewhere, in whatever kitchen exists beyond this one, Nana Rose knows too. It's a Sunday morning, December, Boise is doing that thing it does in winter where the foothills turn white and the river slows down and the whole city pulls its collar up and leans into the cold like it's done this before and will do it again. I'm in the bakery kitchen at 5 a.m. Lily is asleep upstairs in the apartment I've built above the bakery. A real apartment, a real bedroom, a real home. Biscuit is snoring under the counter. The sourdough is rising. The ovens are warm. I'm making bread. The same bread Nana Rose taught me. The same bread I made in my studio apartment at 2 a.m. for a little girl I could only see every other Saturday. The same bread that a man in a courtroom said I didn't deserve. The dough is soft under my hands. The kitchen smells like yeast and butter and home. Bread is patience. You can't rush the rise. You can't skip the knead. You put in the time or you get nothing worth eating. I put in the time. 2 years. 3 jobs. 4 hours of sleep. 18 months of soon, baby. 1 key. 1 grandmother. 1 piece of paper that a dead woman hid in a bank because she loved me enough to see what I couldn't. And now the bread is rising. And it's mine. Who in your life protected you before you even knew you needed it? Who put something in a box, in a drawer, in a will, in a letter that saved you years later? Say their name. Not in your head, out loud, in the comments. Let them be heard. Because the people who save us aren't always the ones standing in front of us. Sometimes they're the ones who left something behind. A key, a copy, a recipe, a note that says, I love you, baby. Make the good bread. And if you know a woman right now who's working 3 jobs in silence, who lost everything and is rebuilding cent by cent, who the world wrote off but who refuses to stay written, send her this story, not as inspiration, as evidence. Evidence that the fight isn't over until you say it's over, and that sometimes the woman who wins is the one who is patient enough to wait for the rise. I'll see you in the next one.